Good morning and welcome to the next webinar describing the INTERsoft-INTELLICAD program. Today I'll discuss printing both from the model and from the layout. But let's start by explaining the concept of a model, layout, and viewport. What is it? So far, when I've drew all the elements in my webinars, I did it in the model. At the bottom of the screen on the left, we have the model and layout tabs. There's always only one model, and this model cannot be deleted. This is where you insert your project. Here you draw in a one-to-one scale, but remembering that you define the units yourself. You define them, and you don't indicate anywhere whether you draw in centimeters, millimeters, or meters. Please remember for all elements to be entered in the same units. When it comes to layout, paper, sheet of paper, you can call it that. It will be your printout, which is a arranged sheet that will later come out of the printer. There you will add various descriptions, tables, and you will define the appearance of your printout and draw it on these tabs here. The layout is called differently in different programs. Manufacturers call it differently, users also. Usually it is a sheet or paper or a piece of paper, something that you will be able to compose and define exactly what your printer or virtual printout will look like when you save it to a PDF file. You have a viewport on the layout. There can be any number of viewports. There can be just one, or there can be several. These are the print areas. Each print area on such a sheet can be at a different scale. You can have, for example, a view or cross-section of a building drawn in one scale and a detail drawn next to it, which will be several times larger. You can define and compose it yourself. The viewport, as you can see here in this example, are different areas of your project that you can show in many ways, helping yourself in the drawing. You have a lot of elements in the project, but you don't always need all of them, and of course, you're only working on one piece at a time. If you want to make things easier, you can define a viewport on the view ribbon. They can be, as here, several on one model. There can also be just one. There's usually one viewport in the project. And please note, as I zoom in, you can see all elements. You just see the three-part viewports. Viewports in the layout and viewports in the model are a bit different because in the model they are only part of a drawing representation, and viewports in the layout can have different scales additionally defined. In a model, it is always on a one-to-one scale, and whether it will be in one viewport or in three, this model is always shown exactly the same way. While on the sheet, you can show it differently. Let me start by describing how to print from the model. So from the first tab, I choose what I'll print. I'm zooming in. Of course, I should draw a sheet paper scale depending on the scale I want to print. But let's start with what scale I want to print it. I go to the program icon. Here in the upper left corner, I select the print option and now either print preview or page setup. Or I simply select the print option because I want to print from the model. I will choose one connected to the network and what I have here on the list. It depends mainly on what printers and drivers for these printers you have installed. The ones here are DWG to PDF, DWT files. Basically, the last 5 are added with the program. And you can use them. Only some of them will not have a print preview. These are PDF printers, so they will print to PDF for you. So you'll have this view almost up to date in this file. Therefore, this preview at the bottom may not appear in some of these printers. Of course, you can download any PDF printer you want, and I'll talk more about it later. For now, I choose a printer connected to the network. Depending on the printer you have chosen, you will have the available formats. If it is a printer that can print in any format, then you can also use it on the spool and save formats by selecting them from the list. I drew on a scale of 1:1, and this project was created in centimeters. Here you can convert to millimeters or inches, depending on which measurement unit you want to use. I prefer to convert to millimeters, and now when it comes to the scale of the printout, of course it can't be 1:1, because I absolutely won't fit it on an A4 format. First, let's try a scale of 1:50. And here, for now, I entered 1:50 because I want to have this fragment for the drawing in such a scale, But right away I'll tell you that this is not the correctly entered value of the printing scale, because I drew it in centimeters, and here I have to convert it to millimeters, which means that I need to offset 1 0, which will allow me to print one drawing unit in 5 units on the printout. Depending on the unit in which you drew, you will have to convert them. So if it was in millimeters, I would put it in 1 to 50 scale. If it is centimeters, I put it in 1 to 5 scale. If it was in meters, I would put it in 0.5. Therefore, you have to use this conversion factor here. You can center it on the page, and most importantly, you have to show what you will be printing. I choose window, because that's how I want to show it. You can also choose extents, and I can set limits, but I want to show specifically what I'm going to print here. The option of selecting this area for printing is immediately shown, and now on the right side you have information in which style you can print. What are print styles? There are 2 types in styles in INTERsoft-INTELLICAD. These are CTB and STB files. By default, the program creates a template with a CTB file. If you have a STB file and you would like to change it, at the end of this webinar, I will tell you how to do it. What are print styles? These templates. It's about how you define your drawing and how you print it afterwards. You can draw it the way you used to draw, which is the way you draw it with colors without adding any thickness to these elements. Lines, circles, only defining the color. And then you enter such a template, and in the properties, you define what thickness is assigned to a given color. Having such a template, you do not define these thicknesses in subsequent drawings because you have your style defined by yourself. You just use only the same colors and print the project in the same way. Some companies work so that everyone has the same print style, everyone draws exactly the same way. Thanks to this, the way the drawing is printed is the same. However, you can also define it in different ways. For example, that the red color is not a thickness, but that the red color is black on the printout. For example, I draw in such a way that I do not display the thickness of the line in the drawing. It's easier for me to draw if all the thicknesses are the same. I only turn them on here before printing. And when defining the layers, of course, I specify the thickness of these elements. However, I draw in colors because it is more readable for me. And that's why I chose a monochrome style later. If I do not want to have a color printout because I have, for example, a black and white printer, then all colors are automatically converted to black and printed in monochrome. But remember this especially when you have a black background and use such colors as yellow or light gray, because these colors will not change automatically. They will be light. There might be a light gray when printed, and colors such as yellow may be virtually invisible and will not be printed at all because the printer will not see them. For this reason, especially if you use a black background, the colors that look good on it, if you print it later even on a black and white printer, remember to convert all colors to black accordingly. Of course, you can define a template where you have, let's say, some development, and most of the drawing is actually printed in black. But there are elements to be demolished that will be red. So if the document you can draw in any color, because it's more convenient for you and it's clear, and then you turn everything on but red into black. Everything but one of the reds, because here, when you go to the style properties, you will also have several shades of red. All the colors are available here, exactly 256 colors. These can also be any number of red colors, so in the drawing you can use several shades of red and change the rest to black. It will depend on you what the printout will look like and whether you'll be changing the colors or whether the colors will be changed to a different thickness or line type. And how will this template react, changing our drawing? You can save such a template in your document. To find the place where you save, go to the Windows Explorer window. There you have main Windows documents. There's an ArCADiasoft directory, and here there's an INTELLICAD directory. And that's exactly where your templates are. And if you get any template from outside, please copy it into this location. So in the Windows document, there to the INTERsoft-INTELLICAD 2023 catalog and subsequent numbers, as later there will be subsequent versions. And of course, also earlier versions, if you have them respectively to 2021 or 2022. If you add your own templates from the program, it will automatically be easier to find. Now I'm choosing here that I'm going to print in the same colors that were chosen here. I'll be choosing element thickness from elements, so I have it checked here. I can still show if the orientation is portrait or landscape and check the preview. Unfortunately, this scale is too small, so I will return to this window, but I will leave for a moment. I prepared a sheet earlier which I would like to compose, so you have to draw such a sheet. Then you enter all descriptions and tables into the model, whether it will be on the right side of the sheet or at the bottom, depending on how you want to have the sheet defined. I'll enter the printing section again, and I'll change the scale to 1 to 20, remembering the conversion factor and pointing to the window. And now it should be on a larger scale. You may notice that I have a shift on the sheet to the top and right. This is the size of the sheet, and this is the print area. I didn't take into account the printer's margin. Each printer has a margin, but it cannot be changed in each printer. This printer chosen by me doesn't have this option, so I have to take it into account. The modification of the print area adjusted for this margin. Changing the printer will change the print area, so remember about this when choosing a printer. Mainly PDF printers have the option to modify the margins, namely zeroing them. In this way, you print from the model. You simply determine the scale, remembering that the units you drew are converted into millimeters. Of course, in case you need it, moving the comma, showing the area that we are printing. Here, even before I close the window, I have to tell you something quite important. When you have a transparency in the document, here it is used on Windows, you can't see it because the elements drawn here are on my solid hatch anyway. However, here I know that the transparency is used here on the windows, and transparency cannot be printed together with plot styles, because in plot styles you define what color is to be converted to what color. Even if it is automatic, these plot styles do not support a transparency. What is it used for? Well, for example, when you have a map and you draw the area you want to color, you have to have them in one shade. It won't be a regular hatch, but a solid hatch, that is the entire surface, but you may want this map underneath to be visible because there is something on it. Then, for example, in hatching, you define transparency. Sometimes you define transparency to a layer. And if you have this transparency selected here, then remember that it will not be printed if you choose a print style. If you do not choose the print style, meaning the thickness and colors will be taken from the elements, then the transparency will be printed. Please note that transparency cannot be printed in the print style. However, if you select transparency and style together, the program will inform us and ask you to choose one of them. Now I'll go to the second way of printing from the program. So, to the layout. On such a sheet, your entire model, all drawings will always be shown regardless of what view you have just taken on the model, whether they are on a fragment of the drawing or you see the entire drawing. The sheet will always show you absolutely the entire extent of the drawing. However, it's not my printable sheet yet because I haven't defined it. I'll go to the output ribbon at the top of the screen, and here I start with the Page Setup Manager, defining my print sheet. So here you can define your own, add for example with information in the name, what the size of your sheet is, in what scale you want to print, and later thanks to this you can transfer these settings to other projects. Now I'll just modify it. I will choose my print styles. Here too, this transparency will not be printed. The styles work exactly the same, so the windows look the same. The only difference here is that I will choose the default printer, the PDF one, but it doesn't really matter except that I have fewer formats because I chose such a printer. I'm certainly also taking over the calculations to millimeters, but I'm defining the scale at this point to a scale of 1 to 1. That's because here in this sheet I'm actually defining the print sheet, which is exactly the sheet on which I'm printing at the scale of 1 to 1, in units like millimeters or inches if you prefer. And I'll print the sheet, which is everything that is on this sheet. The scale is 1 to 1. You can center it if you want. I'm going to be composing this sheet for a while, so here I'm defining, I'm not going to choose these things right now. On the right side, I can define whether I scale thickness or choose thickness from elements depending on what you prefer. Remembering, of course, about two contradictory elements, so the print styles and transparency. You can choose other elements and define the sheet from them. I have grayed out shading options here. If you have this shading option available, it means that you have turned on shading in the project. This is mainly for three-dimensional projects to show, for example, unseen hidden edges, not a mesh model, but with hidden edges to make it more vivid, more readable. If you have them available on a flat drawing, then please switch to display. You can also go to the view ribbon and switch to the mesh model there, because if you have anything else on a flat drawing here, it may happen that you will not print that part. So please remember where to set it. On the view ribbon, and there in the option to switch to the mesh model, then everything will be printed. Here I click OK. I set it as current. And the sheet that you're actually going to print is this sheet. And now what is printed is what is in this viewport. Now I will select this viewport and I can enlarge the sheet by moving these handles. You could say that it is more or less so, and it would even be true. Please note that the snap points do not work here. It moved a bit here, but only because I had this one defined here before. Now please note the snap points do not work. When I had the sheet inserted here, of course, this format moved to what already existed, so it obscured the drawing a bit. To be precise, I should right-click, go to the Properties, and in Properties define the size of the sheet. Here on the left, I have the height, which is A4 format, so 210 by 297. So the size of the sheet is correct. Now to make it match what you want to print, the possible shift, what you want, I made the whole page here. But if you want margins, this page can be reduced by this margin. If you still want to have a place for inserting, you need to reduce it further. And then I already have the shift of this sheet. To make it more accurate, remember that here in the properties of these two windows, you have the coordinates of the center. So you can define exactly where this sheet should be. If it's really going to be centered, it's half height and half width, keeping in mind that these dimensions are inverted, because here you have x and y. So here you have height, and here you have width. But you'll only be able to fine-tune what's here, remembering at the same time that you set it to this sheet. If you have any margin in the printer, you have to check, and if necessary, move the sheet to fit it to this margin, unless you have a printer where the margins can be reset. And now I have defined what will be printed, so the scope of my printout. This is this viewport. This viewport can be on a piece, it can be on the whole area, like you can see here. And now I move. As I move, I zoom the sheet, and my model, which is what is printed, is very tiny. So, what do you need to change? At the bottom of the status bar on the right, I have something like P:"Layout1, because that's the name of my sheet. If it were View 1, it would be P:"View 1. Your sheet is named whatever you want it to be, because here you can give it any name. Of course, you can say it doesn't matter, but when you want to print several things at once later, of course it does. If you know what is on which sheet, these names can contain what is on a given sheet. For example, a cross-section, a view, or other form of printout that you want to present. So if I click on this place on the right once, please note here, I've changed it and now I'm in the model. Model : layout. This viewport becomes bold for me now. And now please notice when I move the zoom, that is the mouse wheel, then I move the model, which is what is in my project, not what is my sheet. And now I can set it up. Let's say that what's on the printout. I go back to the layouts, click once, again I have paper : layout. Please see how I'm moving the entire page now, including the contents. And of course, now I can draw a table from the appropriate ribbons, enter text, or at the top, or depending on the need. I can use this define table here. I can copy a table from another project, or from a model, or from a sheet, remembering that on the previous presentation it was about tables, amongst other things. In the table, you can enter fields that are, for example, a date that automatically refreshes. You can also use this type of facilities in INTERsoft-INTELLICAD, but apart from the fact that here you draw various elements that you need, the scale of your drawing is not defined yet. I did it roughly. I zoomed in on what I wanted to show. How to define a sheet? You could say that I define the sheet and print out one-to-one, but you know that you don't print one-to-one because the model was introduced on a one-to-one scale. You can't even put a small Fiat on an A4 sheet on a one-to-one scale. This car was small, but let's not overdo it. So how to do it now? I select the viewport, so the frame that defines what you are printing, what is in the scope of the printing. And in addition to its size, here in this geometry section, you have a scale here. And now it's a user scale, and you can choose at what scale you want to print. Now, what I had there in the model, when I wanted to print in a scale of 1 to 50, I chose a scale of 1 to 5 because, again, I converted the unit from centimeters to millimeters, and here I do exactly the same. This sheet is scaled 1 to 1, but my viewport is scaled 1 to 20. I'm going to choose 1 to 2 because the offset of this unit of mine. I will center my model, which I want to print. I'm moving it. Of course, the viewport can shift. That's why right after I lock the viewport back, I check if it accidentally shifted. It's not a scale of 1 to 20, still 1 to 20, or 1 to 2 entered here due to the fact that it's centimeters. I scale it to millimeters, and I have a print in the scale of 1 to 20. And now I select print. I don't select the printer, as it was all defined in the sheet settings. I click print, and the printout is done. If we have such a defined sheet, we can duplicate it. We'll make 2 copies. And why? Among other things, so that we can enter here, just change the drawing number and the drawing name and so forth. On this drawing, we only do the following. We move to a different range from our model, disable sheets from our model, and have a predefined sheet without the need to set it up again, without the need to redefine it. I just check every time if I switch to that viewport. I check if the wheel has accidentally shifted backwards or forwards. That would mean that I, of course, changed the scale myself. So we always have to be vigilant about it. But by copying, we can quickly set up the whole drawing. For example, with 5 sections of the drawing, we create 1 sheet, then copy it 5 times, and in each sheet we only change the drawing number, the name of the drawing, and move what is on it for printing. It's a one-time task, and it keeps the project tidy. Please note that I have prepared a table and defined a sheet. However, I don't have it in a model. The model is just to insert what you're working on. The sheet is for drawing, especially for printing. We draw tables and add additional descriptions, which are only for printing. We add additional descriptions, which are only for printing. That's how it should be anyway. I think you understand the point. Here in the model, we only insert elements associated with the model. What's shown in the printout, we draw and add to the printout, and then it gets printed. Of course, it may happen that when we go to the ribbon, to the Output tab, and we have multiple sheets, we can choose the Publish option instead of Print. The Publish option shows all the sheets that we have defined. If we have several projects open, it will also display sheets from different projects. If we had a second drawing, its sheets would also be visible here. I don't want to print these default sheets, but now I can print these defined sheets, show how many copies, and say Print. If something is not correctly defined, for example, if the printer is incorrect, or if we opened a drawing with settings for a different printer than the one we have on this computer, it will be indicated. If there are no errors, we'll be able to print smoothly. If we have a printer connected to our device, to the computer, or to the network we're connected to. If we want to print to PDF, which means a PDF printer, unfortunately, we have to provide the name each time. But if it's a printer connected to the computer, then we enable this Publish option. We publish each sheet in the correct quantity. And of course, during that time, we can go for coffee. One more piece of information. At the very beginning, while discussing our basic topics today, I apologize. I mentioned that we can have any number of viewports on the sheet. And we can have it on the ribbon as well. We can add such a viewport on the ribbon. For example, I will insert it here in the corner. And again, please note that the whole drawing is displayed just like before. I deliberately took out the sheet because this sheet has not been locked or turned off. And if I wanted to select that viewport, they would overlap. And it would be a bit difficult. The program might not select exactly what I want. So, as additional information, after selecting the viewport, we can lock or turn it off on the View tab in the Model Viewport section. The viewport doesn't have to be just a rectangle. It can have a slightly different shape. For example, if it needs to fit into a certain area of a drawing and display a specific non-rectangular portion of the drawing. Sometimes it may happen that when switching between viewports, we simply double-click on the desired viewport. This is exactly the same as clicking on the status bar at the bottom as I showed earlier. But please note that if I click on that part that is accessible to both viewports, it is uncertain which one will be selected. That's why we have the option to lock viewports. However, sometimes it happens that while clicking on the viewport, we accidentally click on the viewport border, and then the viewport displays on the entire screen. It can get a bit confusing at times, making us wonder if we accidentally switched to the model. No, we haven't switched to the model, but just in case, at the top of the screen on the ribbon, under the View tab, in the Model Viewport sections, we have the option to toggle between Minimize Viewport, which maximizes the selected viewport. If someone prefers to compose their sheet in this way, then of course they are welcome to do so. There's Maximize Viewport and Minimize Viewport. Depending on the viewport state, we can switch between these options accordingly. We can also define whether to lock or disable the viewport. Now I'll activate this viewport and show a particular section. Let's set a different scale here. Here we have a scale of 1 to 20. Here we have a scale of 1 to 100. Remembering the conversion factor from centimeters to millimeters. It's straightforward unless someone calculates it differently, but I'll leave that to the mathematician who chose that option. And one more thing I mentioned earlier about the mesh model. If you have a mesh model and realistic view enabled while printing, it means that something here in the flat drawing has been switched, and if necessary, you can simply select the 2D mesh so that the printout is complete and nothing obstructs the view. I think that's everything regarding the sheet for now. I mentioned earlier that you can set print margins somewhere in the print settings, whether it's in the model or the sheet. It depends on the printer you have. Not all printers have this option. Even PDF printers may not all have the option to remove margins. However, if you search and choose the right printer, go to the settings and look into the advanced options, depending on the printer driver, you might be able to set the margin to 0, amongst other possibilities. For printers, if we want to define a specific format other than A4, we need to first define that custom format and save it as an option to the list. Once it's on the list, we can simply select it without having to redefine it here. So you must define it in the settings first. I mentioned earlier about CTB and STB templates. Now we will enter the model, and there are two variables that are absolutely necessary in such cases. Here at the bottom of the screen, please pay attention to the first variable. There's an underscore convert CTB. Convert CTB. It gives us the possibility to change the print style from the default one in INTERsoft-INTELLICAD to a template. The print style STB. If we are sending the project to someone else and they use STB styles, we can send the file along with it, and that our printout will appear exactly as we intended. To convert it, we need to type underscore convert CTB with an underscore, don't forget about that, and then confirm it. This action will transform the file into an STB style. If we choose the second variable, underscore convert P styles, so underscore convert P styles, then we convert from STB file to a CTB file. So let's say we received a project from someone, and in that project the print style is the STB format, while our program default is CTB. At this moment, let's perform the conversion because we currently have these formats and we want to use them. We type convert TP style, and at this moment we are converting that template to our own. And then in the print options, we can choose the respective template that we defined earlier, the one we usually use for printing. Please remember that the first variable saves files from CTB to STB, while the second variable converts files from STB to CTB. Let's remember that CTB files are default print styles in INTERsoft-INTELLICAD. I was demonstrating printing to both a network printer and to a PDF printer. And essentially, printing to a PDF is no different from printing to a regular printer. We only need to define which printer we choose. However, there's one more thing that I don't recommend while exporting to a PDF file from the model. I don't recommend it because we were talking about the model and exporting a PDF file from it. As I mentioned before, such a model export gives us a print, neither in scale nor in a composed sheet, but it is saved to a file, to a PDF file. Exactly what we have in this drawing. So the sheet will approximately look like this. Of course, without the roof being cut off, but it will have a similar format. However, we have no control over this process. That's why I absolutely do not recommend using the export to PDF option directly from the model. Instead, if we have a composed and defined sheet, then we can definitely choose the export to PDF option. The result will be quite similar to what we would print to a PDF using the print command. The difference is that if we export to a PDF file, we will have the option to include layers in the exported file. If someone later wants to open this project in another CAD program or some other software where these layers might be useful, as they can turn off specific drawings or elements, then exporting to PDF with layers enabled becomes a good option. However, when printing to PDF directly, we don't have this ability to define layers. Only during export, in the window that I showed in the previous presentation, we can enable layer support for PDF prints. If we have more than one sheet in the project, then we can export either just the active sheet or all sheets together. They will be exported into a single document, with each sheet following one after another, creating a comprehensive file containing our entire project if needed. When printing to PDF, each sheet is saved in a separate file. Later, if we wish to modify the PDF, we can do it with appropriate software. However, within the program itself, when printing, we save to separate files, but during the export to PDF, we have the option to print either a single sheet or multiple sheets, all saved in a single document. When it comes to printing, I think we have covered everything and finished today's topic. There's one more presentation left. I encourage you to watch it. There we'll discuss and talk about system variables. As I mentioned before, we will show how to define custom layers, ribbons, palettes, toolbars, aliases, and shortcuts, and these type of more advanced options. That's why I encourage you all to watch the next webinar, which will be number 6 in the series. And for today, I thank you for your participation and hope to see you at the next one.